afternoon. All right, that's a little bit better. I'm Scott Higgins, and I'm the CEO of Veterans Advantage. I'm a former Army vet. How many Army vets do we have here? Hoorah, okay. All right, good. And I want to welcome you to this Veterans Advantage Corporate Career Symposium, the first of its kind. And I'm delighted that you're here. We want you to experience a successful here. I think it's going to be very important, very exciting, and very worthwhile. First, I want to take this opportunity to thank a few people. One is our presenting sponsor, which is General Electric. Then we have a number of underwriting sponsors that we want you to be aware of. Citi, who provided this wonderful venue here. Google, Tudor Investments, Penn Mutual, City University of New York. How many people here are from CUNY? Good group, yeah, great. Frank Sanchez has been very supportive of our efforts. Avis Budget Group and HBO. And then we have our event supporters, and there are many of them that are on the two panels that we're going to have today, and they include BAE Systems, CBS, Dell Computer, Ford, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. Mike Haynie is the executive director. You're going to hear from him in a moment. SAC Capital Advisors, 1-800-FLOWERS, Edge for Vets, and Prudential Financial. I also want to thank our Veterans Advantage team led by Lynn Higgins, who's in the back of the room, the tall, beautiful blonde, who's our Chief Operating Officer, also doubles as my wife. Spouse, Roy Asfar, Rebecca Martin, Angela McFarland, who spent an enormous amount of time and effort organizing this, symposium. And also thanks to Citi, in particular Arlette Jackson, who organizes this entire venue. So our mission here, Veterans Advantage and the presenting sponsors this afternoon, is to assist you in resources and in perspective and in moving your search forward to land a career and a job. So we're going to do that today, I think, through a couple of different venues. One is Mike Haynie, who is the executive director of the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, is going to be speaking to you on an overview of the job market for veterans. And then we have two panels. One which is headed up by Mr. Jones, Rich Jones from CBS in the back, an Army Ranger, who will be talking about veteran resources, corporate resources that are going to be available to you. And then I'm handling one on what we call our corporate panel, hiring practices, corporate culture, and the like. In between that, we have a panel, or rather a talk on resume preparation and interviewing tips, which a gentleman from Citi will be conducting, and I hope that's going to be very valuable for you. Let me just mention there's been a study that it was conducted by two academics from Northeastern University, which was released yesterday, and it indicated that unemployment for people that are unemployed for more than 6 months is a very, very damaging characteristic. It indicates that those who are unemployed for more than 6 months, their chances of getting employment after 6 months is decreased appreciably. So the message to all of you out there is get going on your search. Don't remain unemployed for more than 6 months. And so keep that in mind here, because we're all in favor of you guys, and we're all supportive, and you ladies, of finding satisfying, important careers. And that's what it's all about. So these panels and these corporate officers that are here are some pretty high-powered people. Take what you can from them. I think that you'll find their advice and guidance to be very valuable. They are completely supportive of you folks. They want to see you find important and successful careers. So let's begin. Our keynote speaker, Mike Haynie. You have a booklet here. You can read about Mike's bio in there. He's on page 11. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because he has so many accomplishments. that so we could barely get it on one page, but he is the executive director and founder of Syracuse University's Institute for Veterans and Military Families. He's also a professor of entrepreneurship, the Barnes Professor of Entrepreneurship at Syracuse's Whitman School. Importantly, he's an Air Force veteran and served for 14 years as an officer. Mike's completely committed and dedicated to assisting America's veterans. So we're delighted that Mike could join us today. He's going to talk about the reality of jobs for today's transitioning military veterans. Would you welcome, please, Dr. Michael Haynie.
So Scott had to ask how many Army folks in the room, any Air Force folks in the room? Oh, quite a few. Usually I don't see that. Let the jokes begin, right? Marines, Army guys, I'm used to them by now. I could tell you all, you guys deploy to the Marriott, and it just is what it is, I just say I'm a little smarter than the rest of you. So I'm thrilled to be here. Again, my name is Mike Haynie. I am the director of the Institute for Veterans and Military Families up at SU. Air Force officer, got out in 2006. I'm supposed to, because I'm the academic type, and they said talk about the realities of the job market for vets, and the expectation, I think, is I'm going to put up a bunch of slides and graphs and numbers and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I want to do is talk, because y'all know what the numbers are. You can read them in the newspaper. At the end of the day, though, those numbers describe a big population, and from your perspective, you are a population of one that's looking for a job, either to move from a transition from military life to civilian life, or from an unemployed to an employed situation, or from an underemployed to a fully employed situation, or from a job to a career. And I'm going to lump all those things together in the context of describing your particular situation. And I want to talk to you about the realities of the job market, if you will, from the perspective of the work that myself and the folks that are part of my team up at Syracuse have been doing with the nation's employers for the better part of the last 7 years or so. And before I say anything further, I want to commend all of you for coming out here today. This idea of talking about the realities of the job market, I can tell you one of those realities is that it's competitive, and that shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. But I will tell you, one of the things that sometimes I do vets for a living, and I will do anything within my power to advance the post-service life course of a vet. But one of the things that's sometimes frustrating is vets can be their own worst enemies. And what I mean by that is there are more resources out there and available to all of you than probably there have been in any other time in our recent history. And why I wanted to commend you all for being here is that you're going to increase your chances of finding success in the civilian world of work if you take advantage of those resources. I think there was about 30 people that didn't necessarily show up this morning. And that's a little frustrating, because here's an opportunity. You're going to meet people and hear from people here in a little bit that are no joke. I mean, Rich Jones, the guy that was standing beside me back there, he's a corporate officer of CBS. You're going to hear from folks from Google and General Electric that are in position to become part of your network. And it's a unique opportunity. I commend you all for putting on the suit, putting on the tie, looking good, and actually showing up, because that's step one to finding success in this process. In terms of the realities of the job market, it's interesting. I come at this question from a unique perspective, and it's a unique perspective because I do wear two different hats. I'm a vet myself. I run a national institute focused on, as I said, advancing the post-service life course of vets and their families. At the same time, I'm also a business school professor by both education and by training. And what that means is that while on one hand I'm a passionate advocate for vets. On the other hand, when it comes to private sector employment, I also understand that we really have to move beyond this idea of hiring vets and talking about hiring vets because it's the right thing to do, or that because we have that companies are going to hire vets because they have an obligation to hire vets. You know, it's in your best interest to understand at the end of the day, that's not how private sector business works. I long ago abandoned the idea of having conversations with CEOs and business leaders focused on this idea of hiring vets because they somehow had a moral obligation to do so. Instead, I have the conversation with those CEOs and business leaders about why and how integrating veterans into the civilian workforce, into those companies, is a shrewd business decision, because it's about creating competitive advantage for those companies, and that's lesson number one for you and for them. So what does that mean in the context of the realities of the civilian job market? It means that you have to compete. It means that you have to demonstrate in a clear and compelling way how hiring you, not a vet, but hiring you, is going to make those companies more dynamic and more competitive in the face of an inherently competitive marketplace. Here's the thing. Let me tell you a little secret. I know for a fact that it will. Maybe not as a function of one of you individually, but when we talk about those who have served in the military, all of those folks who have walked in your shoes before you, folks like Rich Jones and Steve Robinson from Prudential, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, and Chris Erbauer, who's back in the back of the room, I think, drinking coffee from GE. These are folks that have leveraged their military service to create really wonderful careers in the private sector. And we also know from academic research, and interestingly, but not necessarily surprising to me, I can stack academic studies floor to ceiling and fill the whole front of this room from studies that have been done looking at people who served in the military as compared to people who didn't after they got out of the military. And I can tell you that, you know what? Hiring a vet makes a company more entrepreneurial. Hiring a vet contributes to cultivating high-performing teams in your companies. Hiring a vet helps create a culture where people are comfortable making decisions in dynamic, uncertain environments. These are all, hiring a vet creates a pathway to global experiences that most people who have served in the military do not have. These are all things that are highly valued in the civilian workforce. And I will tell you, I'm excited to say that I do truly believe, more so in the last year than in the last 6 or 7 years combined, that message is starting to take hold in the private sector. That is, over the course of the last year and a half, we really have witnessed an important and meaningful change with regard to how private sector companies are thinking about and talking about hiring veterans. While 5 years ago it was, you know, the CEO doing the television commercial saying, we're going to hire vets because it's the right thing to do and we have an obligation. You know, at the end of the day, you don't want that job. But what's interesting is now we're hearing the conversations about, and importantly, both publicly and privately, the message is, we want to hire vets because we think they're going to make our companies better. They are going to contribute to us being more competitive, more successful, and ultimately contribute to the bottom line. And when I encounter CEOs today that are not focused on hiring vets, I put my business school professor hat on for a second, and I tell them to look around. Look around the competitive landscape that represents the industry that you compete in. I tell them to look, for example, at the 100,000 Jobs Coalition of companies that, you know, is now about 100 strong, led by J.P. Morgan Chase, that includes companies like Amazon, Delta Airlines, Toys R Us, Target. 100 class-leading companies that have hired about 64,000 vets just in the last 18 months. I tell them to look at the Get Skills to Work initiative led by General Electric that includes Alcoa and Boeing and Lockheed and a group of companies that have made a commitment to invest in creating 15,000 careers in manufacturing for vets over the next several years. These are world-class firms that have made a long-term commitment toward integrating veterans into their workforce. Why hire a veteran? I tell those companies that are not hiring veterans right now that they can answer that question by themselves just by taking a look around at the likes of Citi, GE, Amazon, Target, Walmart, Cintas, Prudential, JP Morgan Chase, Delta, UPS, AT&T, PepsiCo, and many other companies. These are class-leading firms that are class-leading for a reason. They're class-leading because they recognize the value of talent acquisition and talent in their workforce. Why hire a vet? I tell those companies that are not hiring vets that their competitive advantage may very well depend on it. So, problem solved, right? We don't even need to be here. If all these companies are, if we're getting to a point where we're so focused, just put your resumes in the baskets and take off. And take a cookie on your way out the door, right? Companies are starting to get it, but this is not necessarily for you as an individual. Does this not necessarily mean that the problem is going to take care of itself? And if that's what you heard me say, by the way, you really did miss the point. The point I was trying to make is the reality of the job market for veterans is that firms are focused on opportunities to leverage the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you bring with you as a consequence of your military service to make their organizations more competitive. So what that means for you is the reality becomes, how do you convince them that you are the veteran? You know, there's a, look around the room. You've all heard this, right? You know where your competition is? It's sitting right here in this room. The challenge becomes an individual challenge. How do you convince those companies that, you know what, it's not just about hiring any veteran, it's about hiring me. I'm going to make your company better. So how do you do this? You're going to hear lots of strategies and approaches from the panels that are going to come after me, but I want to highlight just a couple things in terms of tips and tools based on what we've seen as a consequence of working with 200 plus companies over the last 5 years, helping them develop programs to integrate vets into their workforce, and also importantly working with vets to help make them civilian workforce ready. First thing I want to suggest to you as a strategy and really an overall approach to pursuing the job search is, you are not defined by your MOS or AFSC or whatever the right service acronym is. You are not defined by that, so you should not let yourself be defined by that. In my opinion, many of these MOS translator tools that we've developed, while very, very well intended, have been corrupted for horrible purposes. And what I mean by that is, unfortunately, some companies have taken to using those MOS translator tools as a way to disqualify you rather than qualify you from employment. And what I mean by that is, you know, somebody tells a recruiter that, you know what, if you're hiring for this job, here are the 2 military specialties that most closely correlate to this particular job. And what they're doing with that information is then saying, okay, of the stack of resumes on my desk, you know, the first screen is going to be, did this person hold that military specialty, yes or no? And if the answer is no, the resume doesn't even get a read beyond the MOS. Don't let that happen for you. We all know how diverse military careers are. While you may hold a particular military specialty, it's high likelihood that even if you were in the military for a very short time, you did many, many different jobs. You had a very diverse set of experiences and training, et cetera. think about how you communicate who you are and the skills that you have in the context of that resume in such a way that it doesn't begin and end with the technical job description of what you did in the military. You have to help people read beyond that particular MOS. Next thing I want to highlight is, and this is a culture thing for all of you, this process, preparing yourself to be well represented in the context of civilian employment. It's not about your team, your unit, your division, your platoon, your battle buddy. It's about you. And one of the things that I love about military culture is that we are discouraged from thinking about ourselves as individuals. We think, how do we describe what we accomplish? We describe, the team did this, the unit did this, we went in and accomplished this or accomplished that. I think that's a wonderful thing. But unfortunately, that doesn't serve you as an individual very well in the context of looking for civilian employment. And I'll make this point by telling you a little story. Young Marine that I've gotten to know very, very well, and, great kid, stellar military record, on and on and on. I mean, the just salt of the earth, is looking for work. And because of what I do, I made a connection, and goes for in for an interview, and at a well-known Fortune 100 kind of company. After the interview's done, he calls me. I think it went pretty well. So I call the line of business manager who was part of the interview team. How'd it go? It didn't go so well. Why didn't it go so well? He said, well, every time we ask questions in the interview about help us give us examples of how you are going to contribute to our mission in the context of this or that, and all of the examples that this young man talked about were as a function of relating it back to what his team did in the military. Well, we went in and did this, and we went in and accomplished that, and what we were able to do here is very similar to what needs to be done here at this company. But at the end of the day, the recruiter said, listen, he talked about what his team did, what we did to get, everybody in the room as part of the interview wasn't able to actually distinguish what this young man's role was in any of that. Do you see what I'm getting at? And it's taboo in the military, right? We don't pump up ourselves. We talk about team. But you know what? In the context of what you have to accomplish at this stage of your transition or your life, you have to walk away from that a little bit and spend some time building your personal brand in the context of this effort. Set your expectations appropriately. When you're looking at job postings, job opportunities, et cetera, do pay attention to what the qualifications of a particular job are. You know what? If you don't have the requisite experience and education to go out and become an investment banker at Citi, probably doesn't make a lot of sense to apply for the job. That said, and this relates to tip number 2, what you do need to do is think, your mindset needs to be, the world is my oyster. Right now, the resources that you have available to you, as I said before, unprecedented. Educational benefits. How many people, for example, are familiar with VA Voc Rehab? Anybody know about VA Voc Rehab program? So, that's a bottomless pit of money at VA that will train you to, whatever skill. I see a big smile. You take advantage of VA Voc? Yeah. So my point, what I'm saying is, you want to be an investment banker, go be an investment banker. But don't have an expectation that's going to happen tomorrow. But figure out what you need to do to get there. What kind of educational background do I need? What kind of skills training do I? And go out and do it. And that might mean that you have to take a job at this point. But you need to think about the process as building a career. And if it means you take a job so that you can get to a point where you're ready to build a career, go do that. But also don't be the reason I say don't apply for the investment banker job today if you don't have, because you're probably not going to get it. And that's one little pinprick but too many people give up on this process as a consequence of the accumulated 10,000 pinpricks that you experience in terms of trying to figure out how to navigate the civilian world of work. Last thing, as a tip, leverage all the resources that you have. There are 41,000 not-for-profits out there right now focused on helping transitioning service members and vets make their way. You know what? Not all of them are very good. Not all of them are any good. But there is a large network of them who are very good at what they do. And a great many are focused on employment. Take advantage of those resources. Take advantage of the government resources. Also work very, very hard to build a network for yourself. Take advantage of all of the opportunities like this where you're going to be put right there in close proximity with folks who can potentially open doors for you. Get cards. If you don't have a card, go make one for yourself. And I don't care if it has nothing but your name and your telephone number on it. Get something in your pocket that you can hand to folks that you meet at events like this that could potentially open doors for you. And as it relates to this, don't be afraid to ask for help. This is another one of those military culture things, and it really does serve as a barrier for you. If somebody can help you get to where you want to be, don't let your pride or your ego get in the way of asking for that help. Finally, last thing I'll say, and I know you're all thinking in your head, finally, I'm going to leave you with this. You need to think about creating your civilian career in the world of work the same way you think about a military mission. That is, you have to give it the same kind of energy, focus, attention to detail, apply the same sense of amount of resiliency that you have to realize as a consequence of military service, even the same emotion and passion that you felt accomplishing a military mission to finding and building for yourself a civilian career. Because at the end of the day, I would do you a disservice if I said anything other than the fact that this is going to be a fight. It is a fight. This is a discontinuous transition. But I would also argue at the end of the day, who better than to take on a fight than a vet? So I wish you well, good luck. I'll be around, and if there's time to chat later on, but please take full advantage of the next couple hours, because this is an opportunity that folks don't get all that often. So have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate those words of wisdom.